Hello everyone and welcome to our free live Q&A. My name is Alicia Edge. I'm an advanced sports dietitian and also co-founder of the Compeat Academy, which is an incredible arm of our business that we created out of a need that we witnessed with practitioners feeling really lonely, feeling a little bit unsure and feeling behind on their professional development, supervision access and all those things. And so we have got the Academy with lots of different modules, a whole beautiful community, but also so much in our communication and support for that development pathway, but also career pathway. So if you are not a member as yet, we would love for you to join. It is one of our favorite things and something we are so grateful to have a part of our business that we get to call work, but it really isn't because we enjoy it so much. But this live Academy Q&A is all about just having these big conversations about topics that can be a little bit divisive in our profession at times. And I think today is one of those things when we're going to talk about meal plans. We wanted to cover this because it does come up in conversation in our supervision sessions, but also our one-on-one sessions. It's something that we see utilized so differently amongst our profession, and it can have really divided ways of thinking in our profession as well. I'm going to meet this in the middle though. I am going to sit on the fence for this discussion to ensure that we see both parts, to ensure that you get to see, the positive potential of meal plans, but also the real risks when it doesn't land well. I am someone who has changed a lot in how I practice and how do I utilize meal plans if and when I use them. So I feel like I'm coming from a background of a lot of experience with these, but also a lot of learnings with them as well. Which I cannot wait to share with you. So with the meal plan discussion, it's not going to be that it's the villain. It's also not going to be our gold standard. It's about where do we meet in the middle to really work through what our fit is and what solution we're needing to create for the problem that's in front of us or the barrier that's in front of us for our clients. We will cover, what they are. Let's actually work out a definition because who actually has one? When they actually work, when they really don't work well, but also talk through a little bit of the backfiring of meal plans, AI, where that's coming in, but also, where that scope of practice fits as well. So first of all, a meal plan. Honestly, I have done so many different types of these throughout my years since graduation. They have shifted and changed over time. And I think it's really important that we note when we say meal plan, it's not like we have this really set definition of what a meal plan is. It's like meal prep, right? Like there's a scaled piece to this where meal prep can be anything from like all those beautifully curated glass containers all stacked nicely for the week ahead, all the way to actually, I just went grocery shopping and that was part of my meal prep for the week. So in meal planning, it's very similar where there can be meal plans that are extremely curated, extremely prescriptive, and that can include anything from like the grams, the measurements, the timings, the exact meals that someone needs to be eating at each point in time over the day. And we've also got things like structured templates where there's options, there's structure, but there's also flexibility within that. There's flexible guides talking about that flexibility where maybe you're using like plate models, plate portioning, performance plates, and guiding based around that. So not necessarily prescribing what food goes on there, but how to plate it up. And there's also components of this where maybe there's plans or guides based around habit formations as well. So I think there's lots there. I feel like I still haven't covered all of the possible meal plans, but they're the main ones that we might see in practice, that we might see handed out to clients. We might see lots of different professions providing clients as well. So when are they genuinely useful? And I'm talking to a range of practitioners in this session. So let me really work through this to make sure I don't miss the mark myself in when I'm talking to meal plans. Talking about meal plans, I apologize. I guess the first one to cover off is sometimes there is a real clinical need for specificity. So the need to be really prescriptive, really precise. I am talking ICU, anything to do with intake, different nutrients needed, but also the clinical need around renal, oncology, just to name a few. It can be really prescriptive. It can be really necessary for the health and the well-being of that individual in front of us to ensure that we prescribe. I will come back to this though, of how to do that better. There can be actually moments where, and I have utilized this 100%, where there is such a high cognitive load of the individual in front of you that taking some of that load away with some prescription guidance or templating can be fundamentally useful for that individual in front of you. And I think this is part of why it's so important that we don't have this black or white, good versus bad mentality around all the tools that we can utilize as practitioners. It's actually our job to listen to what is necessary for the individual and then work through what that best provision of solution looks like with them, not at them. I'll definitely talk about that a little bit later as well. There's also performance logistics. I think in the sports space, we'd see this a lot, where there might be competition-based plans necessary, logistics, travel, camps, all those types of things where we've got a really clear outcome, a very short-term goal, and it needs to be prescriptive to ensure that we're reaching the levels, because we can't rely on things like a predictable environment or access. We can't rely on things like hunger and fullness cues when we're actually going beyond what our body would generally do as normal in intake. And also, we may use a plan as a bit of a teaching tool, a bit of a confidence builder, like just as an example as well. So I think all those areas can be really useful. It can be a scaffold. But I think one part of this is always questioning, am I giving this tool as the solution? Or am I giving this tool as a temporary builder towards a bigger plan that actually holds with it some trickier conversations, deeper conversations, and skill-based learning to ensure they're not having to follow this as maybe the band-aid that we're putting onto the hopeful solution that it is. And I think that comes in really similar to how I would hope most would think about things like meal trackers, calorie counters, all those types of things, where I don't think any of those tools should be used long term. And I think if that is the long-term solution, there's a really big conversation underneath it that's not being had. And this is similar where meal plans fit. When they miss the mark, I have lots to say about this. I have absolutely been one who has done harm with meal plans. I will absolutely admit to that. That is a learning over my career. It's been something that I've worked through, learned from hopefully, but also just from simply listening to client experience, person experience, and appreciating that my intent was always good, but the delivery could have been improved to ensure that the outcome was better. I think probably the big framework there to bring in first is, say, the RAVES framework, where we're looking at regularity, adequacy, variety, eating socially, and spontaneity in decision. If we're giving meal plans structure, prescription as the solution and the fix, we're actually often removing two of those bottom layers of a really essential part of feeding and food decision and relationship with food, which is eating socially and spontaneous decision making. And we're creating rigidity in someone's food intake. Now, in the short term, there might be a really clear purpose towards that rigidity, and it might have a really clear outcome long term that we're looking to achieve. However, there is a really big risk to that because it starts to place rigidity alongside restriction. And if that is met with feelings of failure, a rule book to again fail, the guilt and shame that's associated with that, then you're getting into territory where there is harm being done by a tool that has been provided by a practitioner. So I think it's really, really important to appreciate that there's always good intention with giving a solution or a perceived solution, but to really reflect on what am I actually trying to solve here, and is it actually doing so, is a really important reflective tool that we can continuously ask as practitioners. Alongside that, excuse me, alongside that rigidity, we also can have, that rule breaking mentality. And that'll sit in some of the control discussions I'll have in a sec. But also, I think there's so many pieces here to discuss, but the band-aid solutioning that often we place in meal plans is something that I really dislike in our profession. I feel like often we are placing a meal plan or a prescription as our value add. And now add AI to the discussion, and we are in a whole lot of trouble if, as a profession, that is where our value sits or where we perceive our value sitting, because that boat has sailed. Like, meal plans is something that can be spat out very, very quickly with minimal input. And if our value add is I provide meal plans, then I think there's a really big value piece that you're lacking in professional life, where that value add needs to sit a whole lot deeper in how you provide value to your clients. And I think that's a really tricky, very vulnerable discussion, but a really important one to have so that we continue to progress our profession, but also progress your professional career and those types of things in years to come as well. So I think if I reflect back on my own practice as well, I think so often when I was prescribing, it was a safe option, right? Like, I knew the science, I could then share the science. And if they followed the science, we should be able to achieve the outcome or the goal outcome. However, by doing so, what we were usually doing is we were measuring compliance rather than competence. And there was a really big gap there that created a lot of angst for clients, and I think still does create a lot of angst. And that's where we really do need to sit and like work through what our goal is with meal plans and how to do them better. The other piece to doing them better, and this is something I reflect on and repeat often, so those who have come to sessions before would have heard this, is that how much are we doing at the client, so telling the client what to do, versus how much are we doing with the client alongside us? Because I think so much of that prescriptive piece is placing you as the practitioner, as the expert in their life and also in nutrition. Whereas what we actually want to do is go, I am the expert in nutrition. I know a lot about the science and I know a lot about where we want to get to and what success can look like nutrition wise, but you are the expert in your life. So how do we actually partner that up so that we're creating the tools that you need to get where you need to be with you, not at you? And that's something that can take a lot of learning, a lot of listening, a lot of sitting back, but it's a really, really big component on how we utilize these tools better in a way that is much less harmful and risky for the client, but also for yourself as well. Um, there's a lot of confirmation bias, I think, as well, that we can appreciate in this whole piece of meal plans and where they sit in our profession. The confirmation bias I'm referring to is a client will often ask for a meal plan. So we think, well, I like to please, I like to fix, I like to prescribe. And so I'll give them that meal plan. But how often are we actually reflecting, checking in back to go, has that actually worked? And is the client checking back in, or are you checking back in? And how often is that actually a free flow of change, adaptation, flexibility, rather than I have given you the answers. If you don't follow it, that's on you. I have given you the answers. If you follow it, then you will succeed, rather than actually sitting back and going, hey, I can see that there's this really big piece that we want to achieve together. Let's actually design that together and work through what is best for you in this moment in time. And sometimes that might be a meal plan, but there needs to be a longer term piece to that solution that isn't a meal plan. So when we're looking at that decision lens, I guess the big thing there is readiness. Is probably the first one. So really looking at when we're talking about readiness, asking, I guess are they asking for structure or are they asking to be told what to do? Two very different things. And it's really important to work through that in your conversations and we'll kind of work through what they're actually looking for in a sec, but the readiness piece is really important. And who's doing the designing, as we said, in this readiness piece. The function, what's it solving? What's the gap? What's the barrier? What's the problem that we're solving by providing a meal plan? Is it a logistics gap? Is it a knowledge gap? Is it an emotional or behavior gap? And I can tell you now, if it's an emotional and behavior gap, the meal plan is not sitting in the right place and probably should never be something that is the tool to replace an emotional and behavioral gap. What's the duration? I think so often this isn't part of the first discussions and it needs to be. When we're talking with a client, we're working through a progress, we're working through a progression of what success looks like to their goal. It really needs to be from here, we'll do this. If this happens, there needs to be a plan A, plan B, plan C, but also there needs to be a progression of what that looks like to get there. And if we're giving out tools such as a meal plan, there needs to be a really clear piece of this is something we will use for this amount of time for this purpose. But then what we want to see is you utilize and build things like skills, resilience, flexibility, trust, all those types of things to get to a place where you don't need that. That is not a crux that they need anymore. There needs to be a real consideration of risk. On one side, that could actually be clinical risk, where the clinical need for a very structured, very prescriptive meal plan overrides the other factors because it's really, really important that it's very precise for the clinical based need of that client in front of you. But on the same side, if you haven't done any review screening for relationship with food, body image, it is very risky behavior from a practitioner to be providing meal plans and prescription without the behavior other risk lens. And also the alternative. So in your decision making, what's the alternative? If the meal plan isn't the solution, or if it's not something we utilize straight away or at all, what's the alternative here? Could it instead be a conversation? Sometimes it can be. Could it instead be a skill-based session or skill-based learning focus? Could it be habits and behavior-led? So all these types of things need to be discussed. And, I've covered hardly any of those alternatives, but just some examples. I do want to dig in, and I'm just looking at the time. I do have time to cover this, I feel, is designing with, not at, and what that actually looks like. Because I think in practice that can feel really, really tricky. And what I'm referring to there is that discussion that we've just had where we're working alongside someone rather than telling them what to do. And to sit back and do that can be really hard, particularly with the time intensive nature of any planning to be done, any collaborative planning to be done in particular. And I think sometimes due to the time sensitivity of design and delivery, we do end up prescribing or giving them a plan done outside of the time that we're spending with them. The old oh, let me sit with that and I'll just deliver it to you by Friday. I'll go away and put this together for you. Those types of pieces happen all the time, particularly in private practice, because how on earth can we do something at the same time as having someone in front of us? But what I mean by the co-delivery and the co-design is ensuring that when you're designing something alongside someone, what you're doing is inviting them into the process. You're inviting them to be part of the solution. But really importantly, you're inviting them to design something that they feel confident in doing and that is actually designed for what's possible in their life, that it's enjoyable for them, it's possible. And hopefully they're going out of this going, I'm 8+ confident out of 10 that I can actually achieve this and this actually fits with something I can do, rather than looking at a meal plan going, I can see the solution. Why on earth can't I do it? Why am I the failure again? I've got the solution, I've got the answers. It's me that's the problem. And I think that's what we're really trying to avoid. So one way that I often work with practitioners on improving their ability in this area is to use sentences that actually start with the why and the purpose and then see where that leads. So for example, you might have a goal based around all the things that you've collected about this individual and can see potential-wise where we need to get to. You might say, overall, we really need to get to a point where you're eating more over the day. Sometimes a really great step in that is to eat more at such and such meal. So let's say it's lunch. I can see a really big potential to add a little bit more into lunch. Do you have any ideas on what that could look like? Or is there anything that you've thought of that you'd love to try? Or, do you have the ability to do that? Do you think in terms of appetite or capacity, access, all those types of things? And just by sparking, we need to eat more at lunch, as an example, they may come up with the solutions themselves and you can work alongside them to go, that's amazing. Let's do this. Or I love that idea. What about this? and actually then come up with this is what we're going to do. So when I have lunch, I will. And you have really direct pieces there to add where it's actually working with what they're currently doing and habits stacking on top of it rather than giving them a completely different lunch idea that they've never made before. They're not in the pattern of having access to. They've got to shop differently, cook differently, prepare differently. The friction in that is immense. And if you're then working with someone with low mental capacity, high stress load, family, work, life, sport, all those things, it's very unlikely that that prescription, even though the science is so sound, and I really, really trust you on that, that it's actually going to be something that's worthwhile and valuable in that person's life. Because science is only valuable if someone can actually follow it and do it. Now, where does AI sit in all this? I should probably start talking about this considering I've already yapped. I think it changes everything in the best possible way. It makes things so much more efficient. And as I said from the start, if so much of how you practice as a dietitian or nutritionist is based around how well you provide meal plans, I think there is going to be a challenge in future years. However, if your value is how you practice as a dietitian and nutritionist is all about relationship, empathy, behavior change, I think you're going to be absolutely fine. Because even if you provide meal plans as a tool, as a part of that practice, it will be amplifying your solution, not replacing. So, where AI is great at the moment, it is really good at first drafts, at idea collaboration, templating, logistics based planning, and just structure. Where it's not great is actually accuracy of any calculation. I'm still so confused why AI is so bad at calculating and estimating. I really felt like it's so much more definitive and objective that I thought that's where it would be so good, but it's not great. It's not great at reading a room. It's not great at sensing readiness. It's not great at adapting based around capacity, emotional need, but also behavior change. And it doesn't have your clinical judgment. So lots of pieces there where AI is going to be really good and is really good at the templating, drafting, but your critical thinking and your knowledge is so important. Like without it, you've just got a really sloppy meal plan that is actually not effective and a lot of the time not accurate. So making sure that we're utilizing it for the right purpose and appreciating what AI is good at and what it's actually really poor at is really, really important in this. It'll keep getting better. You know, that's how AI works. It's a processing tool. But AI literacy for you guys is essential as a practitioner, a particular future proof professional. But that critical check and ability to look at those outputs, adapt those outputs, and personalize them is where you're placed. But more than any of this, if we ignore the whole tool piece, your ability to hold relationships, conversation, communication, and empathy, that's you. That is absolutely something that will not be replaced. And you can utilize the AI tools to make everything you do outside of that efficient, but you've got to hold your ability to see and change an individual in a positive sense as your value add as a dietitian and nutritionist. So, meal plans are a tool, they are just that. They're not right or wrong, but they can absolutely do harm if used incorrectly and poorly in professional life. And so it's really, really important that there's a really strong decision making done when we're working with a client and choosing or working alongside them on what the best option solution looks like for them moving forward. So I will now open up for questions. I couldn't have done that timing. Amazing. And I have already had a question sent through. So if no one else has any questions straight up, I will jump into it because it's a really good question. But if anyone else going live has any questions, please flick them through. The question, I'm just going to drink water. So the question that came through was, but clients ask for meal plans and I feel pressure to deliver. I think first and foremost, as a profession, we are people pleasers, which isn't a bad thing. Like, I think sometimes it's said in a negative, but and sometimes it is a negative in my life. It definitely has been at times. Um, so we do tend to want to deliver what people ask for. But also, I think there's a pressure to always show and feel that they've got something tangible to leave with. Absolutely, because we're such a soft profession that relies on conversation and counseling. Um, and then alongside that, I think a lot of people come to us assuming that that's what we do, that's what we deliver, and also that's all I need. Like if you tell me what to do, I'll do it. I just need someone to tell me what to do. And I feel that 100%. And I actually am someone who advocates for you don't have to deny and have this black and white thinking with meal plans and just go, that's not what I do. That's not going to be helpful. Actually, your role is to listen. And when I say listen, I mean actually ask the curious questions, the why questions after that request happens. So if someone comes to you wanting a meal plan, they're coming to you requesting something. That is going to be the biggest thing you want to get out of that is actually questioning what that feels like, what success will feel like from that meal plan. And I think you can kind of move through what that is, oh God, what function that is providing is probably the best way to put it. It can provide certainty for that individual. They might be looking for that feeling and sense of certainty through a meal plan. They may be looking for some relief from decision fatigue. They might be looking for some permission to eat, permission to choose, permission for flexibility, all those different things. They might be looking for structure and they might be also looking for trust. Like, there's so many people who are like, I actually just can't trust my judgment, my body yet. And I need this structure, this template to do that for me for now. So there's lots of different things there. I think the other piece to this that I absolutely probably should have been the top of that list is control. But I want to split control into two parts for the main reason. I think when someone is wanting control from, the requests such as wanting a meal plan, I think it comes from two places, and the two places are really important to work through which one is which. The first one is agency. So, I actually want to know that I'm choosing well. So it's almost like a reinforcement, decision making, and a build towards resilience and confidence. That's one part of control, which can actually be really great in the positive sense. But there's also an anxiety led control that people are wanting where I need to know exactly what to do so that nothing goes wrong. And it's a control based on rigidity and perfectionism. And it can be a really behavior centered need that won't fix the underlying issue. So I think that's a really important thing to kind of work through. So I think like something that I always come back to with meal plans is does this rigid structure, so, in some types of meal plans where you're having a lot of specificity, and as I said, sometimes that's needed, does it hand them control or does it just hand them a new set of rules to follow, be controlled by, or break? And that will depend on who you're delivering it to and knowing them innately on the true barriers of what they're facing when it comes to nutrition, but also their eating decisions in particular. Sorry, I just saw a thing. Would you have the same view on athletes wanting prescriptive meal planning for endurance and ultra endurance training? I actually don't have the same view. I have a very different view, and I think this is where we've got to consider the risk and clinical need, and also the short-term nature of something like a competition meal plan, of what it's actually solutioning. Because when you're looking at competition meal plans, the reason why specificity can work quite well and prescription can work quite well is because we're asking them to do things and eat things that aren't actually going to be aligned to, we don't want flexibility, we don't want spontaneity, we need resilience in decision making and flexibility in the way that if something goes wrong, we have a plan A, plan B, plan C. But they're also unable to trust appetite cues, fullness cues, And the amount that we're looking for in timing needs to be quite calculated to ensure that we're getting the performance outcome, but also the health protective outcome of eating enough, hydrating enough, all those types of things. The other piece to competition planning is that it's often drip fed to train the gut, ensure tolerance, and adapt based around that. And it has a very clear timeline. It's short term, it has a clear goal, and it has a clear end date. So I think that's where there can be really big differences, and why it's so important that as practitioners, we're not like anti anything. We actually listen, we actually think about what is the root problem here and what's the actual solution to that. And sometimes it is actually prescription, control in the positive sense, and structure to guide the best decision for the athlete in front of us. Um, all right, from Daisy, thank you so much. You mentioned it being collaborative and client-led, but have you found anything else throughout your career that helps make meal plans better for our clients? Oh, yeah. I really like that. There's other pieces there. I think getting really obsessed with behavior change and behavior-led care has changed who I am as a practitioner and how I actually look at anything to do with nutrition based goals, outcomes, and directions. And every time I am thinking about what I put on a recommendation or a plan or something I'm designing with a client or an athlete, it is so centered on what are they currently doing? What is their capacity mentally and physically? What's actually in their ability to follow? What makes sense in their life? What's obvious? What's enjoyable? What's actually something that they've got the skills to do? And I'm always basing recommendations off what's going to be the lowest friction for them to follow long term, if that is the goal to gain something long term, flexible, resilient, all those types of things. Another piece to that that's a really interesting transition that I don't think I realized I did, but definitely our technology did with our specialist platform that we use with our clients, is that we don't do full day meal plans very often. We do very focused, flexible guides based around the different habits that we might be building in that one time. So being okay with stepping back and going, I don't actually have to give all the solutions all at once in one go. I could go, you know what, the big thing, let's go back to that lunch idea that I was talking about earlier and going, let's just start with lunch. Let's look at the options that we've got to build your lunch a little bit better and more adequate, a little bit more flexible, whatever it may be. And the template or the meal plan as such could actually just be lunch. And so I think we do need to give ourselves often permission to step back and go, giving someone everything, a multi-page PDF that looks amazing may make us feel good and also may make the client feel good in that moment in time in terms of feeling like they've got value. But how much is that actually delivering on change over time, trust, process, and skill-based development over time as well? So I think probably the big piece there, Daisy, is I've changed everything about how I used to do meal plans. I think back and I'm pretty horrified at probably what I was doing, but I was doing it with such good intent. But I put the nutrition science first always. And I think I really went in. I think a lot of us newly graduated going, I am the expert in nutrition. This is actually my job is to tell someone how to eat. I've got the solution. You just need to follow it. Come see me. Rather than going, oh, this thing that you want to achieve is incredible. I can't wait for you to feel success in this. Let me sit beside you and help you get there. More like a GPS kind of vibe rather than a prescriptive. I don't know. I need to work on that example. Apologies, didn't go anywhere because I can't think of another example. But anyway, yeah, I've changed a lot. But I think that's just about listening as well. And I can see so many clinicians doing such incredible things with all the different tools we can now access, but having that long-term solution and appreciating that I'm not here to solve or fix, I'm actually here to work alongside does change how we perceive and how we use something like a meal plan or a templating tool. Great question. Awesome. Well, we have absolutely utilize all our time, which isn't surprising. I love this topic because it does make us think about all the different things that we can improve as practitioners. As I mentioned at the start, if you are not yet a Compeat Academy member, we've got different options, membership options to suit every budget to ensure that you can be at least a part of our community. I really hope this has been really useful. Please let me know your thoughts. It's something I'm happy to continue chatting about. And if you have any questions if you're watching the recording, please reach out and I'm more than happy to answer via email, Instagram, wherever you might find us. So thank you so much for joining, guys, and we'll chat very soon.